I think we could probably all stand here and talk the rest of the time together. Sounds like there's a lot of good fellowship going on. We're glad all of you are here today. If you haven't met Clay Harper, be sure you meet him after we're dismissed this morning. Clay came alongside of us when Charlie Huffman passed away to commit himself. He's retired now, and he's committed himself 100% to getting out and helping raising funds for the work in Brazil, for the Bible Institute, for the congregations there, the ministers that are working there. And Clay is doing an outstanding job, and we're so grateful that he's working with us. This is one of those men that you realize God had a plan, and God put him in your life for a reason. And he is just serving the Lord very faithfully. And we're very glad that Clay's here today. He's going to make a report about the work in Brazil and then offer us an invitation. And Clay, we'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you. And for the guys that were there yesterday, I brought my own water. And I seem to have misplaced my pen. And that's about as far as that analogy goes, except for the part that I probably have 4 hours worth of material. I'll try and condense it down here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. You guys are doing a very important work in helping keep the Brazil church planting ministry moving forward. And this is a chance for me to just tell you a little bit about what God is doing down there and what He's given us, both of us, a chance to participate in. So this is Brazil. Brazil is the fifth largest nation by land area. I don't know where this is going to work. Yeah, there we go. You can see it's about the same size as the lower 48. It's just behind the United States in land area, and it's the sixth largest by population. So 200 million people live in Brazil. So it's a big place with lots of need. There we go. It's going to work. Our work focuses in the state of Minas Gerais, which means General Mines. It's about the same size as Texas, land area-wise. You can see it's kind of in the south and east. Got about 20 million people that live in this state. It's a mountainous state, lots of trees and mountains and things like that. And the capital of that state is called Belo Horizonte. It's actually the third largest metropolitan area in Brazil. So everybody's heard of Sao Paulo and Rio, and then there's Belo. So it's a big place, 5.5 million souls in that metropolitan area. Comparable to Houston, it's got about 6.5 million souls. So just to give you an idea, it's a big place. Some people think, they think of Brazil, and they think of the Amazon and people in huts. This is very much of an urban area with all the pros and cons that go with an urban area. The primary language is Portuguese. The Brazilians in general are very favorable towards America and Americans. That's kind of a double-edged sword. So they're very interested in what's going on in America, and so they get the movies down there about the same time we do. And you know as well as I do, some of those movies are good and some of them are not so good. So we're exporting our culture down that direction, and some days that helps and some days it doesn't. There's a huge spiritual shift that God has been doing in Brazil over the course of the time that this ministry has been going on. As you can see, in 1970, there was about 92% of Brazil that claimed to be Catholic. And in the course of time, they've grown from 95 million people to 208 million people, and the spiritual landscape has changed significantly. So now only about 50% of the people will say that they're a Catholic. The Protestant, which is, as surveyors go, is a bucket of a whole bunch of things, has grown significantly. But one of the things that I point out is this one right here. This is the people that say, when the surveyor says, what's your church home? I don't have one. None. Unaffiliated. And that 14% represents about 29 million Brazilians. We'll come back to that later on. So in 1967, A group of Christians headed down to Belo Horizonte to start spreading the gospel. Pretty good-sized crowd of them, and one of them was Charlie Huffman and his family. Charlie spent 12 years down there as a missionary, and then his wife died from a medical problem. He ended up back in the States. He eventually remarried, but it just didn't work out for him to be able to go back to Brazil as much as he would like to have done that. So he spent time preaching in various congregations, and then in 1991 he started this ministry, the Brazil Church Planting Ministry, with a focus on helping the Brazilians to be successful spreading the gospel. As I mentioned earlier, we focus on the state of Minas Gerais, and we're specifically, we look at Belo Horizonte, as I mentioned, and then there's 4 cities around the compass points here, so Uberlândia, Montes Claros, Governor Valadares, and Juiz de Fora, and each of these is a pretty good-sized city in its own right. Most of them 400 to 600,000 people. And the goal is to help build good, strong, self-sufficient churches in each of these compass point cities that can then spread the gospel out into the areas around them. Part of our strategy is focused on Brazilians. They already know the language, they know the culture, they're used to the standard of living, and they're already home. And so, for example, we're going to talk about a team that moved from Belo to Juiz de Fora. They're only about 4 hours away from their hometown, so birthdays, holidays, those kinds of things, they could go home, people could come see them. It just helps from the satisfaction of the work. So here we are, Juiz de Fora. This work began actually today. They're having a celebration down there, or maybe they've already had it, of being in this city for 15 years. The team you can see here at the bottom, they trained for a couple of years in Belo Horizonte, and then a team of 5 families packed up their stuff and moved 4 hours away to this city where there wasn't a Church of Christ. And they started off meeting in a little storefront. They met in a school for a while. They met on the top floor of this apartment house for a while. Johnny's been to most of those places. And then eventually they were able to get this church building on a good thoroughfare and keep working. Over the course of time, 3 of the families went on to other things, and about 7 or 8 years ago, the 2 remaining families were kind of swapped to be vocational missionaries, and so they got jobs. They continued to live there and work with the church. In hindsight, we might have pulled that trigger a little bit too quickly. So they're very busy now, working to keep to support their families, and they do continue to work with the church, but the church has kind of reached a plateau. And so one of the things that we're working on right now, one of the projects that we're working on, is we'd like to get a full-time minister back into Juiz de Fora. It's a city of 600,000 people. And we've got about 30 to 40 members in our congregation, and we need that to grow and for them to be more dynamic and to start spreading to other churches around the city and around that area. So one of the things that we're working on right now is to get a full-time person to help us in Juiz de Fora. Uberlândia, another one of the cities I mentioned, 650,000 people. This is the second largest city in the state of Minas Gerais. It's a little bit less mountainous in this area, a little bit more agriculture, but they still do manufacturing. We have 2 families there that are being supported by a congregation out in Tennessee. We have Celio and his wife Carol with Gabriel and Davy, and then we have Delmiro and Regina with Samuel and Mariana. And they're doing a good job. Things are going pretty well right now in Uberlândia. There's 2 primary congregations that these guys work with. They both work with both congregations. So the Aurora congregation meets Sunday mornings, and then the City Garden congregation meets Sunday evenings. And as you can see, we've got a pretty good attendance there. These gentlemen also put on a men's retreat. So last August, They had a men's retreat, and this is, I want to tell you a little bit about Sebastian. Sebastian is 66. He has 8 kids, 4 boys and 4 girls, and he hasn't really been all that good of a father. So he was kind of in and out of his kids' lives, and eventually left his wife and remarried someone else. The good news is all 8 of his children became Christians. In fact, one of his children is Celio, that's now working full-time in that church. But as much as they tried, he always resisted the gospel. This last August, right before the men's retreat, like the Thursday before Friday was going to be the men's retreat, they'd asked him to do some stuff around the building. He was working around the building. He felt a call from God while he was working around the building. He said, well, maybe I'll go to that retreat. While he was at the retreat, he was convicted. He decided he'd like to obey the gospel. He went home to his wife, Lindora, who'd actually been kind of waiting on him, and she said yes. And so that evening, that Sunday evening, after the retreat, at the worship service, they were both baptized. The interesting thing was, that happened to be Father's Day. And he was baptized by one of his sons. So what a great day. What a great day that was. I recently got to go for the first time to Montes Claros, which is in the north part, about 400,000 people in this city. And a gentleman named John, moved there with his family, I don't know when that was, some years back, a few years back. And he moved there to work. But since he got there, he's kind of started a congregation. And the congregation is starting to grow. They've got about 20 to 30 members there. But John works at a school for disabled folks, disadvantaged folks. And he's taking classes so that he can become a teacher. And you can see he has a beautiful family there to keep up with. So he's starting to feel the effects of the growing congregation, seeing the need that we need to get somebody there to help him in a full-time capacity. Now, I've also got a picture here of Dionisio. He lives in Belo Horizonte. He goes about once a month and spends time with the congregation, spends a weekend with them to help. And this man is a workhorse. So when Ricardo and I went with him to visit Montes Claros, Dionisio had us a schedule. We started at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning, and we were making the last at pretty much every hour. The schedule had break on there. I thought, oh boy, I'll get to take a little break, maybe wrap it out. No, the break was just you didn't have a visit that time. So we went to the last visit at 9 o'clock that night. And I don't know about you guys, but if you had a couple of guys show up on your doorstep 9 o'clock at night, I'm not sure I would welcome them in, spend some time with them, chat, relaxed, but that's the way these guys work. That's the way this culture works. They're very friendly. We would go in and visit with these people at each place, and this is a very receptive city. We've got a lot to do. Oh, I was going to point out, this is Nilsson, and this little thing that he's holding up is he was baptized not that long ago. And Dionisio makes them a little plaque. It's got a picture of them when they were baptized and has some scripture and a date and things like that. And then they have a presentation to the person to congratulate them on their baptism, gives them something to... In fact, one of the houses we went to, they had theirs displayed, where they had been baptized, and it's an important thing to them there. Bechin. Bechin's an example of the kind of church that we're trying to accomplish all over the place. It's a good, strong church. It's about 110 members. They're self-sufficient, self-supporting. They have 3 elders, and they have had 2 ministers, and they're self-replicating. So over the course of their history since 1983, they've counted 90 of their members that they have either sent to other congregations or sent to some place to start a new congregation. Now, some of you have met. I said, one of those 2 ministers was Fernando. And on January 2nd, just a week or so ago, he was in a car accident. and he was killed in that car accident, and his wife was seriously injured. So pray for this congregation. They're still reeling. Fernando was a good hard worker. He was well respected. He had spent a lot of time working with the youth and had done a very good job with that. And, it's going to take them a little bit of time to heal from that process. Ligiani, just a little aside here, Ligiani is recuperating. She had broken ribs and a broken arm, punctured lung. She's working her way through those. They've done one surgery on her arm. They're going to do another surgery early this next week. And then if things look good, she'll be able to go to her parents' house in Juiz de Fora and recuperate there. So things are, and we appreciate your prayers and concerns. I know many of you have been keeping up with that. An important part of our strategy is the Charlie Huffman Institute of Evangelism. This was started several years back, and the Brazilians named it after Charlie. We were there when they announced that, and he was very surprised and honored. It's a 2-year program for both men and women, where they study a number of Bible topics and other relevant things, how to do small groups, some counseling things, a little bit of Greek and Hebrew kind of stuff, just to give them some basics. And this is a picture of the class that just graduated in December. Normally about half of the graduates will enter the ministry in some way, and then the others will go back into the workplace, but they're equipped. They have knowledge and background that a lot of them haven't gotten as they've grown up, and they're better equipped to evangelize their coworkers, to become an important part of their congregation, leaders in the future of their congregation. Our next class starts actually tomorrow, and it'll be our largest class yet. We have 19 students, and as you can see, for the first time as well, we have 3 of the scholarships. We provide scholarships so that they can focus on their work and study full time. And 3 of those scholarships are actually going to be provided by churches in Brazil. So that's a good step. That's a good thing for us to move forward with. A number of things the Institute does. In addition to classes, they have the students do things in the afternoons. They'll be involved in going to some of these cities to help with campaigns and such. And another thing they do is about once a quarter, they have what they call an intensive course, an all-day Saturday thing. They open that up to the community. In this case, they had 50 people there from 11 different congregations, and the topic was how to interpret the Bible and the great deeds of God. And it was a good session. So it's taken a whole bunch of us to try to fill the gap that Charlie left. So we have here at the top, this is Giovanni. Giovanni was baptized in his teens by Charlie and spent many years learning from him. He is currently, he's one of the elders in the Beijing congregation, and he's also the director of the Institute. He's a very dynamic preacher and is in demand, not only to preach, but he's also in demand. He's known as a mediator. And so he's also in demand from various congregations. Will call him, say, hey, we're having this problem here. How would you deal with it? Sometimes even we need you to come over and help us work through this. So he's a good man. We also have Ricardo Maya. Many of you may have met him before. Ricardo is a very dynamic, outgoing person. One of those never met a stranger kind of persons. Not at all unusual for you to be walking down the street and he'll just stop somebody and start talking to them. Did you know? No, I didn't know him. But he does now. And so he's a very good man. He is, Ricardo is helping us in what I call kind of church relations. So one of the things that Charlie did every time he went down there would be go around and visit various congregations, understand how things are going, help keep them in communication with each other, just understand their needs. And Ricardo's helping us to fill that gap. This is my wife, Perry. She would like to have been here today, but wasn't able to make this trip. She's a very important part of this ministry as well. She's not too good at standing up here and talking in front of folks, but I guarantee she would know all of you and figure out how we're related about 15 minutes after she came in the door. And I'll talk about these other guys here in a minute. One of the things that Ricardo is doing, kind of in the church relations aspect, he's put together what he calls the Huffman Maya Foundation. And he had the first meeting of this foundation when I was there back in August. Got about 20 men and that are ministers in the city of Bello. And we spent an evening, some encouraging messages, some songs. And then 6 of them, he had them stand up. They said nice things about them. And then they knelt down and the men gathered around each of them. They did it one at a time and they prayed over them. And there was a lot of tears. It was a good evening. And several of them told him afterwards, the only time people ever call us together anymore is when they have something they want to complain about. You're not doing this, you're not doing that, you did that. And this was a session where people were encouraged. And that's exactly the kind of work that we want Ricardo to be doing and helping to build up the churches. I do thank you for, I get this picture, I don't know, it's probably not even a current one. But it's what you got on your website. So we really do appreciate the work that you guys are doing to sponsor this ministry and to provide guidance and help for us. And so thank you very much. So how can you be involved? There's a couple of things. We keep informed. We have a newsletter. If you're not getting the newsletter and you'd like to, let me know. We can get you an email copy or get it mailed to you. We also now have a webpage. So this BrazilCPM.org, if you head out there, you can find out a little bit more about what's going on. And with Michael's advice, we've gotten a Facebook page going. And so we put some things out there periodically. You're welcome to join us there and see what's going on. Financially, you guys are being very helpful to us. And we appreciate that. Again, your funds go to help with scholarships and also to help support the full-time ministers and the operating expenses of the Institute. And as mentioned earlier, a group is going to go this July. We're putting together the details now. If anybody else is interested, let Johnny know. And we'd love to have you come down. If July doesn't work for you, I plan to go down 2 or 3 times this year. And you can tag along with me sometime and come see what's going on. We'll be hanging out with Ricardo. You have to bring your running shoes. But otherwise, it's a good time. Great people, great food. They're just amazing people. And the most important part is pray. The harvest is plentiful, as I mentioned before. There are many people there that need to hear the gospel. We've made progress. We've made good progress through the course of this ministry, but we still have a long ways to go. And please pray for this ministry. And speaking of harvest, I'd like to talk a little bit about seeds. So, have you ever stopped to consider a seed? If you found one of these seeds laying on the ground, would you know? I mean, you can't just look at it and say, well, what is that? Maybe some of you can. This happens to be apple seeds. And so, to look at that and say, well, but was it a Granny Smith or was it Gala? What kind of seed was that? Well, if you're going to plant it, you're going to get that seed back. If you think about that a little bit, I mean, there's a small package. I've got a seed in here. I know you can't see it, so I got a picture up here for you. I've got a piece of plastic, and I've got a rock, and I've got an apple seed in here. So if I take those and I put them in a pot with some good soil and give them water and I give them sunlight, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to the plastic? Well, give it a couple hundred years, it might decompose. Well, what about the rock? It's going to kind of sit there like a rock. What about the seed? Something amazing is going to happen. It's going to sprout, become a sapling, in this case a tree. Over time it's going to blossom, it's going to produce fruit. You'll have dozens of apples that will produce hundreds of seeds, each of which could start the whole process over. So, and not only that, it's going to help convert carbon dioxide to oxygen. It's going to give us food for us and animals. There's wood there that Johnny can turn into a pin or something else. It's amazing, all the things that come. You know, men, as creative as we are, we can get in and twiddle the bits a little bit inside a seed, but there's no man that's going to take carbon and oxygen and hydrogen, put it all together in the right way, pack it into that small little thing to make a seed that if you plant into the ground is going to make a tree that's going to make more seeds. You know, our culture is just, we're saturated with evolution and with things all just kind of happen from a big bang. They even did a TV show on it. We don't even recognize it anymore. We even talk about it in our own speech and don't recognize how much that we're kind of indoctrinated by this. Well, it just all kind of happened by accident. I can't believe that. I look at a seed and I think about the complexity that goes into that seed, and I have to believe God's version. Over here in Genesis chapter 1, what verses do I want? Let the land, verse 11, then God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it according to their various kinds. And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw it was good. You know, it does take faith to believe that. But I think it takes more faith to think it all just happened. Oh yeah, give it a couple billion years. We'll get a seed out of it. And kind of in that same vein, let's look at this. This is chlorophyll. You know, the stuff that makes plants green. And it's involved in that process of taking carbon dioxide and taking it back to oxygen. If that looks complex, well, that's because it is. And to think that some random sequence of events, I'll give you a trillion years. To think that some random sequence of events put this together in this just the right way. And not only that, that little seed that we had out here, there's not enough chlorophyll in there to fill all the color, all the leaves in the tree. Somewhere along the way, that seed's going to have to generate some more chlorophyll to turn all those leaves green. Without an instruction book, kind of like other Apple products, you have to get it just right. Again, I go with God's version. Let's talk a little bit about spiritual seed. The seeds, Jesus told parables about seeds. In the parable of the sower, the seed was the Word of God, and the people were the various types of soil. In the parable of the wheats and tares, the seed was the people, and some of them were good and some of them were bad. But in either case, the simple seed started a process that generated something that you could tell. It generated a fruit. And thus you have a principle, just like we read about here in Genesis a few minutes ago, that Jesus talked about in Matthew 12:33. He said, make a tree good and its fruit will be good. Make a tree bad and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is recognized from its fruit. And so, as Michael talked about this morning in class, we're recognized by the fruit of our lives and what we do with the people around us. And Paul helps us in Galatians 5 to recognize the difference between the fruit. Some of it's bad. Galatians 5:19. The acts of the sinful nature are obvious. Sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissension, faction, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. But he also tells us what the good fruit looks like. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. You're here today because somebody cared enough to plant the seed in your heart and it's taken root. Sometimes you need to take a look in the mirror and think about, what kind of fruit are others seeing in my life? What kind of seed, what is the seed in my life bearing as I deal with others? Jesus told the disciples to go and make disciples, to teach. You know, this is becoming more and more important. The world around us is sowing seeds of hatred and discord and strife. We see it everywhere, and it seems to be escalating. Either it's escalating or the news is we know more about it. Maybe a little bit of both. And then what do we reap as a society when these are the seeds that are being sown? And we wonder why there's violence, and we wonder why we have to worry about our kids, or why nobody seems to be able to get along. It's always got to be something we're going to fight about. The need for the good news that we have has perhaps never been greater. We need to be out actively telling people about the good news, again, as Michael told us in class this morning. And we need to be planting the good seeds. You know, I've talked about the opportunities that we have to share the good news in Brazil, but there's also opportunities right around us, again, as Michael said this morning. I pulled this data from something called City Data. I was surprised when I saw this. The people in Ellis County that do not claim to have a religion, 48%. That's 72,000 people around you that when life happens, we all know you can skate through life for a little while and say, oh yeah, I don't go to church. But then something's going to happen. You're going to get married, you're going to have a child, you're going to get a disease, the child may die, or somebody else you love. And when life happens, you need something to lean on. You need people you can gather with. You need a Savior. And if you don't know about God at that stage in your life, you're going to turn to all sorts of weird and bad things. And it's not going to be good. There are lots of people around you that need the good news, just as Michael said earlier today. So, and he even talked about going in a restaurant. So you go in a restaurant, and there's 20 people in there. 10 of them, my little blue halos didn't show up too good. 10 of them are going to say, oh, I don't have a religion. And they won't be blue, and they won't have a little halo. How are you going to know? Well, you're just going to have to learn. You're going to have to talk to them. You're going to have to meet them. You're going to have to be kind to them, whether you know whether they are or not, whichever color dot they are. You need to plant seeds of kindness. And you may not convert them right there just like that, but your good deed, your niceness, your kindness will move them closer to the kingdom. Because there's no place you can go, whether it's down the block or around the world, that God is not already working to bring people to Him. And He's counting on you to do your part, to help spread that word, to help draw them to Him. And that's really our job, is to be out there to plant those good seeds, love and joy and peace and kindness and goodness and faithfulness, gentleness and self-control, and to help others to come to know the Lord.